Anthropic just announced they're partnering with SpaceX for compute. And when I say compute, I mean 222,000 NVIDIA GPUs worth of compute. 300 megawatts of power within a month. And because of that, they're doubling Claude Code's usage limits and removing peak hour restrictions for Pro and Max users. This happened like a few days ago. So you should be experiencing the outcomes. But here's the part that got me. Buried in the announcement, they said they were exploring partnering with SpaceX to develop gigawatts of orbital AI compute capacity. Orbital, as in space, as in satellites running AI models. Let me break down what just happened and why this is way bigger than just Claude got faster. First, the immediate stuff that affects you right now. Effective May 6th, Claude Code usage and limits doubled if you're on Pro, Max, Team, or Enterprise. Which means if you're hitting those limits like I have, you're about to get way more runway before Claude tells you to slow down. 2, peak hours limit reduction is gone before this. If you're using Claude Code during peak hours on Pro or Max, you'd hit lower limits. That's gone now. No more throttling based on the time of day. And 3, API rate limits for Opus went up significantly. If you're building with the API and specifically using Claude Opus models, your rate limits just got raised considerably. I'm talking requests per minute, tokens per day. All of them have been increased, which means if you've been building production apps with Claude and running into rate limits, you just got a lot more headroom. Now let's talk about what's actually powering this. Anthropic just signed an agreement with SpaceX to use all of the compute capacity at their Colossus 1 data center. All of it. That's over 220,000 NVIDIA GPUs, 300 plus megawatts of power, and they said within the month, meaning this isn't just some 2027 thing, this is happening this year. And this is on top of the insane amount of compute deals they already announced. Amazon, they got 5 gigawatts, nearly 1 gigawatt coming online by the end of 2026. Google and Broadcom, another 5 gigawatts starting in 2027. And Microsoft and NVIDIA, $30 billion of Azure capacity. FluidStack, another $50 billion, is invested in American AI infrastructure. Like, these are nation state level energy numbers we're talking about here. For context, 1 gigawatt of power powers about 750,000 homes. Anthropic is securing 15 plus gigawatts of compute capacity across all these deals. That's enough to power over 11 million homes. And they're just using it to run AI models. And here's what gets wild. At the end of the announcement, they said as part of this agreement, we also have expressed interest in partnering with SpaceX to develop multiple gigawatts of orbital AI compute capacity. Orbital AI compute. Let me say that one more time. They want AI models in space. Now, they said expressed interest. So this isn't signed yet, but think about what that means. Why would you run AI compute in space? Well, one is power. Space has unlimited solar power. You don't need to worry about grid capacity or energy costs. You just point your solar panels at the sun. Number 2 is cooling. Space is cold, like really cold. Cooling is one of the biggest problems in massive data centers. In space, that's not an issue. 3 is latency. For certain applications, if you got satellites running AI models, you could have global coverage with lower latency for certain use cases. 4, regulatory arbitrage. If your compute is literally in space, it's not subject to any single country's regulations, which that's a whole nother conversation. But the point is, Anthropic is thinking 5 to 10 years ahead and saying, what if we don't build data centers on Earth at all? And SpaceX is the only company that could actually pull this off because they got Starship, the rocket that can launch massive payloads cheaply and frequently. Now, let's talk about why this matters for developers and businesses like you. If you've been building with Claude, whether that's through the API, Claude Code, or just using it for work, you probably noticed capacity issues over the past few months. Rate limits are hitting faster than expected. Slower response times during peak hours. Sometimes you couldn't get access to when you needed it. That's a compute problem. And Anthropic said, we're fixing it aggressively. By the end of 2026, they'll have nearly 1 gigawatt of new Amazon capacity online. Starting in 2027, you have Google Broadcom with 5 gigawatt deal. And right now, within the month, they're getting 220,000 GPUs from SpaceX, which means Cloud is about to get a lot more reliable for production use cases. And here's the business angle that most people aren't really talking about. Anthropic said our enterprise customers, particularly those in regulated industries like financial services, healthcare, and government, increasingly need in-region infrastructure to meet compliance and data residency requirements. So part of this expansion is international. They're building capacity in Asia and Europe specifically for enterprises that need data to stay in region for compliance, which means if you've been wanting to use Claude for European customers or regulated industries but couldn't because of data residency requirements, that barrier is disappearing. And they said they're being very intentional about where it will add capacity, partnering with democratic countries whose legal frameworks support investments at scale, which is interesting because it means they're not building in China, even though that's a huge market. They're prioritizing security and regulatory alignment over pure market size. One more thing that stood out to me though is Anthropic committed to covering any consumer electricity price increases caused by their data centers in the US. And they said, as part of our international expansion, we're exploring ways to extend that commitment to new jurisdictions, which that's actually huge because the data centers use massive amounts of power, and in some regions that's driven up electricity costs for residents. Anthropic is saying if our data center raises your power bill, we'll cover the difference. That's not something OpenAI or Google are doing as far as I know, and it shows that they're thinking about the community impact, not just the infrastructure. So what does all this mean practically? If you're a developer, you could build with more confidence. The capacity issues that made Claude unreliable for production are getting solved. If you're a business, regulated industries just became viable. If data residency was blocking you from using Claude, that problem is going to go away. If you're just using Claude as a regular old user, your limits just doubled and peak hour throttling is gone. You're about to notice Claude being available way more often. And long term, the orbital compute thing, if that does happen, we're talking about AI infrastructure that's literally above any single government's control, like above our head, which depending on your perspective is either really exciting or really concerning. Here's what I keep coming back to. Anthropic is moving faster than anyone expected. A year ago, they were scrappy AI safety company competing with OpenAI and Google. Now they're signing deals with SpaceX for orbital compute and securing 15 plus gigawatts of power capacity. They went from, we care about AI safety, to we're building infrastructure at a nation-state scale. And they're doing it while still maintaining their safety commitments and covering community electricity costs. That's a very different approach than what we're seeing from other AI labs. So here's my question for you. Do you think orbital AI compute actually happens, or do you think it's just Anthropic flexing that they're thinking big? And if it does happen, is that a good thing, or does that concern you? Drop a comment, let's talk about it, because AI infrastructure in space is either the future or the plot of a sci-fi movie, and I honestly don't know which one yet. So anyway, that's the update. Cloud limits doubled, SpaceX has a partnership, possibly orbital compute. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to cover this regularly. And lastly, do more, never give up, and always stay humble. See you in the next one. Bye.